You would, to Joshua chapter 7. Joshua chapter 7. There's stories in the Old Testament that we know pretty well by heart. We grew up with them. And then there's those stories that you hear and you think, I don't remember hearing that one. And yet the two may be closely related. Where I want to pick up today is after Jericho. Jericho was the first battle that the Israelites fought coming into the Promised Land. And it was such an unusual battle from the very beginning, because whenever they got there, they saw this fortified city, and the spies had already searched it out. And if you remember the story of Rahab hiding two of the spies so that they could escape, and how they promised her that they would make sure and protect her when the battle was over, whenever they came and attacked, because she knew that their God was going to give that city over into their hands. And you remember the story of how whenever they came to the place of Jericho, that Jericho was all locked up and tight and secure. And so they had the army of Israel follow the Ark of the Covenant with the 7 priests and the 7 ram's horn, march around the city once a day for 6 days. And the people were not told to make any noise. They were not told to talk or anything until they were called upon. For 6 days, they went all the way around with the priest blowing on the ram's horn. On the 7th day, they went around 7 times. And after they finished the 7th time, that was whenever Joshua gave the command to shout. And as they shouted, the walls of Jericho went flat. And they went in and completely did as they were told to destroy everything in the city, with the exception of the gold and the silver and the brass and the iron. Those things were supposed to go into the Lord's treasury. They belonged to the Lord. That was dedicated to the Lord. And the only thing that was saved out of that besides that was Rahab, her family, and everything that she owned. Now imagine if you had been in that army during that time. You've not really faced much opposition. And to follow around a city for 6 days, and then after you go around it once a day, then you go back to camp. And you do that for 6 days, and you know, I don't know about you, but wouldn't you just kind of go, I think our leaders lost it, you know. I'm just not sure if this is, you know, this just doesn't make any sense to do this. But they did it, and they followed. And then on the 7th day, when they shouted, to see the walls, this fortified city, just completely collapse. And then they went in with great victory. Great victory. The confidence that they must have had in themselves, as well as in their God and in their leader, just skyrocketed. And this is where I want to pick up with you today on chapter 7. Verse 1. But the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully in regards to the things under the ban. Excuse me. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, took some of the things under the ban. Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, Go up and spy out the land. So the men went up and spied out Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said to him, Do not let all the people go up. Only about 2,000 or 3,000 men need to go up to Ai. Do not make all the people toil up there, for they are few. So about 3,000 men from the people went up there, but they fled from the men of Ai. And the men of Ai struck down about 36 of their men and pursued them from the gate as far as Shebarim, and struck them down on the descent. So the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Hold your finger right there for just a second. They've just completely wiped out Jericho. The things that were under the ban that was talked about was the gold and the silver and the bronze and the iron. Those belong to God. They told him not to take anything for yourself, but any of that you see goes to the Lord. It's dedicated to the Lord. But Achan has other plans. Achan, we'll see here in just a minute, sees some of that and decides that looks too good to pass up. At any rate, they have such confidence in themselves, and they have such confidence in what their abilities are. And so Joshua says, send some guys up to Ai, scout them out, see what it looks like, and then come report back to me. They come back and they says, oh, they're just a small place. They're just a small group of people. We can send just a small portion of our army, 2,000 or 3,000 people at the most, and we'll just easy picking. Not going to be no hill for a stepper, no problem whatsoever. And so Joshua sends 3,000 men up to Ai. And here they come, running back, tails between their legs, killed 36 of their own men, and their heart is just melted. And when they come back defeated, then it says the entire nation sees that, and it's just it says their backs become as water. In other words, everything, every life, every encouragement, every promise that they was holding on to is gone. Verse 6. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why did thou ever bring this people over the Jordan, only to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been willing to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say, since Israel has turned their back before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and they will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what wilt thou do for thy great name? Hold your finger there. God had told Joshua how to defeat the nation of Jericho. It didn't seem like it made any sense at all. But it worked. It worked fabulously. He sends his 3,000 troops up to a little smaller place called Ai. They have all the confidence in the world, and they come running back because the men of Ai have chased them back, killing 36 of them. And their confidence is completely gone. And you look at Joshua's response. And Joshua, it may have been the same response that you or I would have had. Joshua falls on his face before God all day long, and then it goes into, oh God, why did you bring us out here just to destroy us? Have you ever noticed that it is our tendency that whenever something goes wrong that catches us off guard, it's always God's fault? We always say, God, how could you do this? God, how could you let this happen? That's the most overused line in all of history. How could you let this happen? But he never once in all this time asked God, what did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? But he had compromised himself to say, if God, why did you allow this to happen? Oh, if we could have just been content over on the other side of Jordan. But on the other side of the Jordan was the wilderness, and this was the promised land. Willing to accept a lot more than what God had in store for them. God, how could you allow this to happen? How could you cause this to happen to us? And then he turns religious on it and he says, now everybody's going to hear about it and they're going to defeat us, and what's that going to do to you? That was where the religious part comes in. Verse 10. I love God's response. So the Lord said to Joshua, rise up. Why is it that you have fallen on your face? Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant, which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of the things under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived. Moreover, they have also put them among their own things. Therefore, the sons of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies, for they have become accursed. I will not be with you any more unless you destroy the things under the ban from your midst. Rise up, consecrate the people, and say, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, has said, there are things under the ban in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you have removed the things under the ban from your midst. After Joshua pulls out his, just like we would, sob story of, God, how could you allow this to happen? Then God speaks to Joshua and he says, Joshua, get up. Get over this. There is sin in the camp. People have taken some of the stuff that was dedicated to me and have put it in their own possession and kept it with their own things. That's what's wrong. That's why the army failed. It's because I cannot bless you, I cannot bless this army, I cannot bless this people when you are unwilling to follow me. When you're unwilling to accept who I am and just be obedient. I can't do it. So he says, get up, consecrate yourself, tell the people to consecrate themselves, cleanse themselves, and he says, we're going to deal with this. It's got to be that stuff that has been stolen and has been for their own good, it's got to be destroyed. We cannot have this dissension within the camp. Verse 14. In the morning, then you shall come near by your tribes, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord takes by lot shall come near by families, and the family which the Lord takes shall come near by households, and the households which the Lord takes shall come near by man by man. And it shall be that the one who is taken with the things under the ban shall be burned with fire, he and all that belongs to him, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, because he has committed a disgraceful thing in Israel. Joshua was supposed to call all the people together, all the 12 tribes, and by lot they chose which one of the tribes it was, and then after it got down to the tribe, then it went down to family by family, and after it got to that, then it went even further to man by man, until all of a sudden, bingo, there was a person. That's how God had it instilled. Verse 16. So Joshua arose early in the morning and brought Israel near by tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the family of Judah near, and he took the family of the Zerahites, and he brought the family of the Zerahites near him, man by man, and Zabni was taken. And he brought his household near, man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabni, son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, was taken. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, I implore you, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and now give praise to him, and tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. So Achan answered Joshua and said, truly I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful mantle from Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold 50 shekels in weight, then I coveted them and took them, and behold, they are concealed in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath it. I saw this beautiful mantle. I saw this silver, and I saw this gold. And I thought, I know I'm not supposed to have this, but I've got to have it for myself. And so he takes it home, and he digs up the dirt in their tent, and buries it all under there and covers it back up. Now then, get into the idea of why would he take it? This is a man who, if he was 40 years old or younger, he had been fed all of his life with the manna from heaven up until just recent days. This is a man who had watched the cloud of God move, and they followed. When it stopped, they stopped. He had watched water come from the rock. If he was over 40 years old, which I don't think he was, but if he was over 40 years old, he may have remembered coming through the Red Sea on dry ground. See, there was nobody there over 60, except for Joshua and Caleb. And just as of recent, before Jericho, they came through the Jordan River during flood stage on dry ground. And yet when he sees the stuff that he's not supposed to touch, but he's supposed to bring it to God, he covets it for himself and keeps it and buries it in his tent. Let's go on. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and behold, it was concealed in his tent with the silver underneath it. And they took them from the inside of the tent and brought them to Joshua and to all the people of Israel, and they poured them out before the Lord. Then Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, the silver, the mantle, the bar of gold, his sons, his daughters, his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all that belonged to him, and they brought them up to the valley of what is now called Achor. And Joshua said, "Why have you troubled us? The Lord will trouble you this day." And all Israel stoned them with stones, and they burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that stands to this day. And the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. Therefore the name of the place has been called the Valley of Achor to this day. By the way, Achor means trouble. So it's the Valley of Trouble. We went to battle with Ai, and we got beat and disgraced and humiliated and defeated. Everybody's encouragement, everybody's demeanor just faded. Joshua sees it, falls on his face, and says, "God, how could you let this happen? How could you let this happen? Did you just bring us out here to destroy us here? Why couldn't we have just stayed where we was at before?" Sounds like his ancestors when they come out of Egypt. And God says, "Get up and cleanse yourself and cleanse my people, because there is sin in the camp. And as long as there's sin in the camp, I cannot bless it, I cannot protect it, I cannot deliver it." Now, Joshua calls all the elders, and he says, 12 tribes, we're going to find out who did this. And by lot, it comes down to Judah. Now put yourself in Achor's place just for a little bit. There's trouble. And Joshua is going to find out who did it. And you're sitting there thinking, well, it's buried. It's buried. Nobody's ever going to find it. The only one who knows it's there is myself and my wife and whoever may have helped me carry it in, and probably my kids, because, face it, if any of us men would go and tear a big hole in our living room floor and bury something, I don't think our wife would not notice it. And so he just sitting tight. But it comes down to the tribe of Judah. And then it comes down to his grandfather. Then it comes down to his father. And then it comes down to man by man. And yet, at no point in this time does it say that Achor ever said, wait a minute, guys, I was the one who did this. Now, why would he do such a thing? My theory there was no doubt that I believed that Achor believed in God, believed in a God. I believe that he saw God take care of so many things, but he never believed in God to take care of him. Here we are, we're going to risk our lives, we're going to defeat Jericho, and all this gold and all this silver and everything, it won't hurt if I just take some of it for myself, because how do I know that God's going to take care of me? I'm just going to keep this for myself, because how do I know that God's going to take care of me? And tell me, what financial benefit does it do you to have gold and silver buried underground that you can't dig up and use? But that was the thought process. And when Joshua finds out what's going on, God says, you will take what has been kept under the ban and you will burn it with fire along with the person who did it and everybody and everything that he owns. Now, honestly, whenever I read that, the first thing I want to think is, boy, that sounds harsh. That really sounds very, very harsh. But I want us to keep in mind that this is at the very beginning of their entering into the promised land. A little sin overlooked early on becomes a lot of sin overlooked later. Because we tend to make excuses for one sin, and that just leads to another, and that just leads to another, and that just leads to another, and that just leads to another. Look in our society today. And so God deals with it in a very, what some would say, very harsh way. Because it's going to take the life of that person and all his family and all of his possessions. Plus, it's also going to destroy the gold and the silver and the iron and everything. And it's all going to be burnt, and then it's going to be piled up with rocks, and it's going to be a memorial to trust God. That's what it's going to be. Now, if you were one of his family, you'd say, no, this just doesn't seem fair. But if you was one of the families of the 36 who lost their life because there was sin in the camp, you might not think it was so tough. You know, you look at today and what we want to hear in churches, that we want to hear about the glory and the splendor of heaven. We want to talk about the gates of pearl and the streets of gold and the mansions that God has prepared for us. But we'd like to just skip over the fires of hell and the weeping and the gnashing of teeth, because that's just not very palatable. It's not very pleasant to think about. And the lie that the devil has placed within so many lives of so-called believers that say, well, you know, how could God ever send anybody to such a terrible place? When they don't realize that he doesn't send anybody to hell. We do that ourselves. See, if the punishment is not severe enough, it does not serve as a deterrent. That's why hell is so awful. At the same time, if you take away how bad hell is, then all of a sudden, heaven doesn't look that good, because there's not enough contrast. So that the severity of the punishment was to fit the crime. Now, why did Achan do it? Because he believed in a God, but he didn't believe God. You know, it's one thing to have a knowledge of God. It's another thing to have a trust in God. Trust in God says, you know, I don't know how you're going to work this out, God. It doesn't have to make sense for me, but I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to believe you, and I'm going to follow you. But when you just have a belief in a God, you have the belief that, well, yeah, there's a God out there someplace, but I'm still on my own, and I got to take care of myself. And if it gets to where I can't do it, then I'll see if I can't conjure up this God that everybody talks about and see if I can't get him to help me. But whenever you just have a belief in a God, but you don't have a trust and a belief in God, then you really don't have anything. You know, we have people that quote John 3:16 so much, whosoever believes. Well, I qualify then. I believe in a God. But that's not the same thing. You know, the devil believes in God. And the devil probably knows the word a lot better than you or I do. Because he's going to take it, and he wants to take it and twist it and to confuse you and to mislead you. And the devil does not want you to believe and trust in God. He just wants you to believe that there is a God. Because he knows that on itself will not get you anywhere. Achan had God all around him all of his life. And yet when it come down to the temptation, he just couldn't trust God. Just couldn't trust him, even though he had been around him all of his life. You know, there's the phrase that's been going around for years, well, you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And you know what? That's right. But if you are a Christian, you're a follower of Christ, you want to be amongst his people and you want to be amongst his family. But this is not the entirety of Christianity right here inside this room. It's living the life that God has called you to live and following the examples that he has set before us whenever, just while we're in here, but whenever we get out of here. So that others might come to know him. Not so that we can have lone rangers out here and out here and out here and out here and out here. Because those lone rangers tend to just believe in a God, but don't believe in God. Achan found out whenever it started narrowing down, okay, they've got my tribe. I might be in trouble here. Oh no, they've got down to my grandfather. It's getting dangerously close. They've gotten down to my father. Now then, they've gotten down to me. You think he didn't believe in God right then? But you know what? Unfortunately, it was too late. It was too late. There's a story that Jesus tells in the New Testament about the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man lived a great, full, wonderful life. And there was a beggar by the name of Lazarus who used to just beg for the crumbs that would fall at his feet. And the rich man despised Lazarus all of his life and just didn't even like him around. Time passed. Lazarus dies. Time passed. The rich man dies as well. But one day the rich man looks up from the burning abyss that he was in, and he sees Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham in comfort. And he calls out and he says, is there any way that this man that I have despised all of my entire life could just dip his finger in some water and touch my tongue to cool it? And Abraham says, no, there is a chasm here that cannot be crossed. And he says, well, then could you send him back to tell my brothers and my family not to let anybody else come to this terrible, awful place? And Abraham's response was, even though one returns from the dead, people will still not believe. Which was a prophecy of Christ. We have the power of God working around us all the time. I mean, just the fact that the sun comes up every morning, the beautiful sunsets that we have seen over the past few days, as Donna mentioned, the beautiful trees that are out there with the flowers, you know, bringing new life. The trees that are budding forth with leaves. The grass that is turning green and starting to grow, probably faster than we're ready to keep up with. The compassion, the fellowship that we can receive from one another at different times. When somebody just meets a need that we didn't even know fully we had until it's been met, and maybe it's just a word that they said, something that they did unknowingly, but it just meant the world to you. God is all around us. Not so that you can believe in a God, but so that you can believe in God and put your faith and your trust in Him. Yes, the place that God has prepared for each one of us, that believe is a mansion. It is streets of gold. It is gates of pearl. There is no nighttime. There's no sadness. There's no sickness. There's no sorrow. But the place that we choose, if we don't choose Christ, is the absolute opposite of that in the worst possible way. Not to give us a chance to be punished, but as giving us a chance to be blessed by putting our faith and putting our trust and putting our love into the God who sent His only begotten Son to pay the price for our sins. Not so that we can believe in a God, but so that we can believe in God and give Him our life, give Him our trust, and let Him have His way in our life. If you go on and read the rest of what happens as they come into the promised land, yes, God did take that first portion of the gold and the silver. The next battle they go into, guess who gets to keep all the gold and the silver and the livestock and all the possessions? It was the troops. The message there, give first to God and just watch how He pours out His blessings back to you. But don't rob God in giving your first fruits, because that ties His hands to be able to give back to you. This morning, as we've gathered here for worship, I pray that there's something in this that you have gotten out of it that just kind of helps you a little bit in understanding all the things that go on in our world. That also gives you the information you need whenever somebody says, oh yeah, I believe in God. Do you believe in a God, or do you believe in God? Are you willing to give Him your life? Are you willing to trust Him? Are you willing to let Him be God and be the God of your life? As we stand for the hymn of invitation, if God is speaking to your heart, the Holy Spirit is speaking to you, won't you respond as we stand to sing, Shall We Gather at the River? Number 687, all verses.